In this screencast, I'm going to go over some of the common problems that I see with STL files that come through for 3D printing, so that way you can create a better file and be more likely to be successful with printing in the first place. First off, with Tinkercad, I'm going to want to make sure that I rename the file to be something that actually makes sense. This is what the file comes through named as when you export it and then upload it to be printed, so I really want to make sure that it's something that makes sense. It makes it a lot easier for me to find your file on my end. Now we're going to look at the actual shape that I have here. Now I created some problems, common problems that I've seen, and I just made them a little bit more extreme than maybe yours might be. But if I look at this file, look at this design and cruise around, I've got a couple of pretty major flaws. First off, I've got a major overhang here, and this is a clear 90-degree angle hanging off the side. This definitely would not print. If I were to try and print this on the 3D printer, this whole side is going to droop down because it's unsupported. So I really want to make sure that all of my layers, if they're connected, are going to not have an overhang like this for the 3D printer. I pretty much won't print it if I see something like that. It just won't be successful. So I really want to make sure that if you have an overhang like this, that's intentional, that you have some sort of support built in. The other piece that we'll see here is that I actually have a hole within this cylinder, and the hole is way off to the side of the solid cylinder shape. So I really want to make sure that I'm using some tools within Tinkercad in order to make sure that that is aligned correctly. So first off, let's fix the hole problem. Just to demonstrate that a little bit more, if I were to select the hole and then the outside cylinder and then join them together, as I said, this is a little bit of an extreme example, but in this case, I actually have such an overhang or such an overlap on the two pieces that I now have a hole on the side. Although printable, that's obviously not the intention. So I'm going to undo what I just did. I want to make sure that I get them aligned then. So if I click on the two shapes again, and then click on the Align tool, this might be easier done from the bottom in this case, but you can also look at it from above, and the same sort of thing happens. But basically you wind up clicking on the arrows for the middle on each side. Now that I can't click on them, that tells me that the two shapes, the hole and the solid cylinder that I've selected, are aligned in the center for each one. So if I were to group it and then look at it from the bottom again, you'll notice that my shape is now a perfect donut. Well, a little bit of a thin wall donut, but everything is aligned as it should be. So that problem is taken care of. If you're looking at your cylinder shape and you're realizing that it has a lot of sides to it and you'd rather not have it have sides, if you click on the cylinder shape and then increase the number of sides, then it actually smooths it out, so that way it's a little bit more circular than something that has sides on it. So I'll select those two shapes again and then group it. So now I have a very, very pretty hollowed out cone, or cylinder I should say. Then the next piece that I need to solve on this is that overhang. In this case, it's pretty clear to me that the student meant to have the nose cone over the center cylinder. So what I'm going to do first is double check the alignment. So if I select all the shapes again, click on Align. Okay, so we have everything aligned on that end, this end. Now if I look at it from the side, oops, stuff is still overhanging. So now I'm going to double check that the size is actually the same. So if I click on the bottom cylinder, hover on the white block, then it gives me a 20 by 20 measurement. If I click on the nose cone, hover on the corner, it's 22 by 20. So that's obviously not what I wanted. By clicking on the white block, then I can change the 22 to 20. Okay, now you'll notice that it's still overhanging. So I want to make sure that I repeat the same alignment process. You might find that you do the alignment process a lot. I find that when I'm on Tinkercad, I'm often selecting all my shapes and either aligning to center or to one side or the other, simply to keep my files all nice and neat as I go. Now, the last problem that we have here, because although it's aligned, it looks like we're having some design problems in terms of where that cone shape is coming down and meeting our cylinder. So if I were to zoom out, I'm going to get the, once I click on the cone, I'm going to click on the black cone at the very top and raise it up just a bit. Now the intention is to make sure that those two layers are touching. If you find that it's snapping so that it's further apart, you can change your snap grid to be a much smaller measurement, so that way you can increment it up further little by little. But as long as I look at it and everything looks good, And if I select it all and I group it, everything turned to the same color, everything looks like it's all good to go, everything's all attached, then this file could then be printed, exported for printing, and I, for the most part, would be good to go, keeping in mind that in this instance, this wouldn't really be a successful print either because technically the top of this cylinder that I made is solid. So I would want to make sure that I remedy that somehow because otherwise it just won't print successfully. So in this case, I'd want to make another whole cylinder, another whole nose cone or parabola and put it inside of this top parabola in order to make sure that the top is actually supported for printing. But then I can export it. While I'm here, the one last thing that I do want to point out is that because these layers are put together, then I'm ready for printing. Oftentimes I see people who will submit files who submit them, they look great from either the top or from the top side view. So they look awesome from here, but when I actually get the file and I look at it from, for example, the front view, oftentimes it's very subtle, but I'll wind up seeing a shape that is off the rest of the surface. So in this case, hard to tell, but if I look at it closely, you'll see that the top parabola is actually not touching the body of the cylinder. So this would be an automatic rejection from printing. I won't print anything that doesn't have all the shapes connected together. So you do want to make sure that you're paying attention to that. And then the other piece that I will often see is that students or teachers design objects that are sort of floating off the work plane. So again, this gets into making sure that you're looking at it from all views. I'll often have someone that submits a file that looks similar to this. And if you have another shape that's touching the work plane, I can't get both the shapes touching the work plane at the same time. So make sure that when you're touching that when you have all of your objects designed into one, make sure that again you're paying attention to that align, because you can also align all to bottom. In this case, I only have one shape, so I can't do that. But if I were to move this off to the side, basically I would just use align to bottom, and then this shape, even though it's not touching the work plane, because everything is on the same level on the bottom, I would be able to print this. And I would just manually move it onto the print plane for the 3D printer. So those are some common problems that I've seen. If you have any of those problems with your design when I kick it back to you, now you know how to fix it in order to make corrections before submitting it again for printing. Good luck!